Ladies and metal fish, this is your hard-boiled and handsome duelist daddy Janjo here. So, when it comes to the Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon cards, there are slim pickings. Making a list of the best cards is easy. Raigeki, Pot of Greed, Monster Reborn, Larvus, wait what? Everyone and their mother have made a list like this, and I'm no different. But hey, I'm a retro Yu-Gi-Oh channel at heart, and this old stuff is my bread and butter. So let's butter my biscuits and turn the dial the other way and look at the worst cards in a set full of worst list worthy cards. Oh boy, let's go! Number 10 is your mother. Nah, I'm just joking, but really, number 10 is Skull's Servant. A bit of a controversial pick, I know. However, upon release, this was the weakest normal monster in the set. Having a monster with 300 attack and 200 defense is a complete joke and is a key reason why the Skeletal Ghost was a meme for such a long time. Enough to the point it was pushed to get a boss monster in 2005, but everything before that, this was the worst. Since 2005, Servant has received a dedicated deck and support, so while he's bad enough on his own to make this list, it would be disingenuous for me to rank him any higher. Number 9 is your mother again! Nah, in actuality, it's the spiritual successor to Skull's Servant in Basic Insect. While yes, it's not the weakest in the set, the lack of any support follow-up makes this, well, Basic Insect a top contender for worst LOB cards. Like Skull, this insect is apparently also troublesome in swarms, and yet it can't be bothered with any Gokipole like Retrain. Technically speaking, Hard Armor has less attack, but its 1200 defense outweighs anything Insect can muster. Trust me, I don't want to make this list all of the weak vanilla monsters, however, when it comes to weak, low-level ones with no true benefit to run, you can't get much more basic than Basic Insect. Number 8 is Gaia the Fierce Knight. You thought I was going to say your mother again, didn't you? Still on the vanilla train, which actually sounds quite delicious to me, Gaia is on the other end of the problem, being a 2 tribute monster with comparatively subpar stats. 2300 attack and 2100 defense isn't the worst, no. The issue comes from other 2 tribute monsters in this set. Red Eyes Black Dragon, Dark Magician, Trihorn Dragon, and Blue Eyes White Dragon. All of these have the same tribute threshold with simply better attack. Gaia is a monster that can still punch over defenders, just with the caveat of being the most useless of the bunch. It would receive retrains over the years, making the vanilla version all the stinkier. Number 7 is where we change things up with a trap card, Dragon Capture Jar. Change all face-up dragon type monsters into defense position, and they're stuck like that while the continuous jar is on the field. This is a side deck tech at best against early dragon decks, and while you could see this from time to time, it ultimately doesn't deal with the issue at hand. It's such a specific floodgate card that while it does protect you from a Blue Eyes, it doesn't destroy it or remove it from the field. Imagine if this was like a different dimension gate for all dragon monsters. While it's not a completely unplayable card like others on this list, the design of it makes it more questionable than a weak vanilla inherently existing. Moving on to number 6, we're going back to basics. Now, originally I considered placing Fusionist on this list. After all, it's a pathetically weak fusion monster with no effect. But these generic fusion monsters have its uses since in later formats it can be summoned by cards like Metamorphosis or Magical Scientist for particular uses. Fusionist would find its best deck spot in 2014 Infernities for reasons being it can be summoned off instant fusion, is a level 3 which can be Xyz material for cards like Leviair the Sea Dragon, is a beast type so it can be used for Diamond Direwolf's effect, and its earth attribute can find its own uses too, like being specific synchro material. With all that said, I like to keep vanillas together for they have the same purpose. Sandstone is the exception to the rule here. Sandstone is so god awfully bad, I had to place it further down over a card like Dragon Capture Jar. When it comes to 1 tribute normal monsters, you can't get much worse than this Underdwelling Rock. With 1300 attack and 1600 defense, you can't attack over a Witty Phantom, nor can you defend against a Battle Ox. All of this after the fact you most likely lost a monster to tribute summon this joke. Even in the OCG on release, it was an example of bad cards being purposefully printed. After all, not every card is going to be a meta-defining card, and there will be cards meant to be pointless filler. In the case of the Sandy Stone here, not only is it filler, it is actively bad, which puts it much higher on this list compared to its vanilla flavored contemporaries. And if you're enjoying this video, consider engaging with it by either liking the video or commenting something stupid. In addition, if you want to support the channel, consider subscribing or sharing the video out, or checking out my Patreon for plenty of goodies. Going into the top 5, we have Yo Mother! Hey, I'm bringing it back. For real though, we have a bunch of equip spells. Because I can only talk about vanillas without sounding redundant, I had to start shifting towards cards that truly stink of early Yu-Gi-Oh! The first batch of equip spells definitely contend for the worst cards in the set. Now, not every equip spell belongs here. Some have better targets that would be considered meta in March 2002 Yu-Gi-Oh! Others have weak targets yet buff them to at least crash with a 1500 attack monster, a high mark in LOB format. Hell, some monster types wouldn't even receive any equips like Reptile and Pyro. The worst contender of them all has to be Machine Conversion Factory, for it only has 2 targets in LOB, the Fusion Monster Metal Dragon and the 1 Tribute Weakling Seal Ogre Grotto number 1. That's it. No low-level monsters or any monster that breaks the 2000 attack stat barrier. LOB has a metric ton of equips, and the matching monsters are not equal in value. They really should have been based on attribute and not typing. Later that month even, we would see the 2002 starter decks with attribute-based equips that buff by 400 rather than 300, and that extra 100 goes a long way. Although I suppose the LOB equips do increase defense, so you could technically do something. Regardless, these spells are certainly the middle of the road when it comes to the worst cards of the premier set. Number 4 is Gravedigger Ghoul, the first banishing effect in the game. While it does get rid of 2 cards for the price of 1, this ghoul clearly did not go to school. If he did, he would know that banishing only 2 monsters won't generate much advantage in the long term, as the graveyard tends to fill up with more than just 2 monsters. For that matter, Monster Reborn can target monsters in either grave, making Ghoul a tech not worth considering. Furthermore, you can't banish your own monsters, so a later release like Dimension Fusion can't synergize with this. Now, its original printing did mention that the banish cards are banished for the remainder of the duel, which is something interesting to note, but on release, it was essentially useless, and by any time afterwards, it was too slow, especially compared to the orbiting release of Soul Release, which banishes up to 5 cards, not just monsters, from either grave. I'd rather just banish this card from existence. Top 3, oh boy, here we go. First off, we got the 2 healing cards of the set, Red Medicine and Goblin's Secret Remedy. One heals you by 600 and the other 500. Both effects are equally terrible that gain no real advantage. Goblin may be more annoying, for while it does increase by 100 more, it's only 100 more, which is downright disrespectful, and it's a rare of the set. Where is my rare and temperature? Healing cards in the game have always been sketchy, and despite some later release cards making use of the mechanic like Mystic Walk, Aromages, Fire Princess, and general time play, these healing spells just don't do anything to save you from a death-dealing blow. At least the hovering release of Dian Keto heals by 1000. These 2 practically identical cards actively harm your deck building, which is the opposite of what they're designed to do. Number 2 isn't much better, with Sparks. Like Skull Servant, this has become a meme-worthy card, for it only inflicts 200 points of damage to your opponent. This is such a pathetic, deplorable, miserable, pitiful, feeble, and quite frankly heartbreaking burn card. The amount of times this card would come in clutch and not interfere with your deck's consistency is astronomically low. While I suppose it does grant you more push towards game victory over the healing spells, this card is a meme for a reason. 500 life points gained is more than 200 damage dealt in a literal, numerical sense. Unless someone is at 400 life points, Red Medicine alone saves you from 2 uses of Sparks. LOB already has more than 1 superior burn spell with Hinotama and Final Flame. Yes, LOB, out of the kindness of Konami's heart, only gave us Sparks and not Muyang Curry, of which I would consider worse. that has to mean something. Here we are at the worst card of LOB, 2-pronged attack. Compared to Sparks, I think I have to explain this one a bit deeper. On paper, TPA does more in regards to removing a threat, destroys 2 of your monsters to destroy an enemy one. Plus side being, it doesn't tribute as cost and is abnormal monster removal, and that's about it. The issue is the card advantage, since TPA uses 3 of your cards for 1, whereas Sparks is a hard -1. It's one thing like in Metal Raiders where Tainted Wisdom is far less useful in fringed situation as Yado Karu and its minus effect. It's another thing when you have a card that while technically it is a form of removal, the amount of card loss outweighs the benefit of playing it over a bad card that does less. TPA does more, but it also does more in regards to disadvantage by a significant amount. Metal Raiders also gave us Tribute to the Doomed, a proactive removal that only costs 2 cards, and 1 is any card from your hand, not harming field presence. This is a turd that is trying to mask itself as something else, and that's just awful, compared to cards that are plainly bad. When looking at the weak or situational cards in LOB, playing TPA puts you at a much higher disadvantage than any other card on this list, and is ultimately why it's the worst card in Legend of Blue Eyes White Dragon. But let me know what you think. Agree? Disagree? I don't really care.